I think the lesson to be learned through our long-standing efforts around interoperability is that you can't address this problem with a single component. So what I mean by that is spectrum without a plan isn't really a plan. You need to have a plan for funding, you need to have a plan for standards, you need to have the spectrum. We learned that, at least my personal experience with that, revolves around the Public Safety Interoperability Communications Grant Program that came out of the DTV transition. Prior to that program, interoperability had been a very well articulated problem, but it wasn't a very well measured problem. So for the first 5 years of DHS's existence, interoperability was an eligible cost for the emergency preparedness grants. And those grants were something on the order of $5 billion a year, and more than half went to interoperability every year. So over those 5 years, we invested at the federal level close to $10 billion in interoperability. And at the end of that exercise, nobody could answer the question, what are your interoperability capabilities and what are the gaps? Where do you have this problem? And we just simply hadn't measured it. So for the PSIC program, we had $1 billion one time to go out for interoperability, and we decided not to make the same mistake. And it was a criteria that before the money would be made available, that you had to measure. Where do you have operability and interoperability? Where do you have the gaps? What is your plan? How are you going to do this? And if you can show us that if we give you this money, you will close those gaps, then the money can get released. I think in a very similar way, the FCC's plan for the D block and for public safety broadband is building on that very same record of success, where they say we're going to have spectrum made available, but there's also going to be a plan for funding for that spectrum. There is going to be a plan for rules and standards to be set so that the public safety community can interconnect and operate with the commercial networks, which is absolutely a key part of this. And I think Harold is exactly right when he underscores that. The commercial networks that are out there now are going to have to be a key component of any broadband solution for public safety. When it comes to broadband, we're not talking about an interoperability problem for public safety. It's operability. They currently don't have a broadband solution. This isn't the dynamic that we had in two-way radio where you've got lots of disparate systems and you need them to be able to talk to one another. This is, we don't have it. And that is a national shame that we haven't been able to provide that for the public safety community. But the cold reality is those commercial networks that are out there, which are, like I said, going to be a key component of anything. No one is going to say that public safety should rely strictly on commercial networks and have nothing else. But in 90% plus of the geography, 90% plus of the time, those networks that are out there are suitable for the vast majority of public safety needs. If you were to try and focus capital and spectrum resources to recreate that 90%, rather than devote our spectrum and our capital to vote on the 10% of the geography and the 10% of the time where it doesn't work, you're going to have a much more quick and efficient resolution to this problem. The numbers that people talk about, and we're going to build a redundant, our own public safety network. These numbers have been debated since the original D-block proposal and in the things that are on now. People say $5 billion, $10 billion, $15 billion, $50 billion. The commercial networks that have already been built represent a capital investment of more like $500 billion. You can't recreate that as a separate network for public safety. Public safety is going to have to partner with commercial networks. But again, I think part of the elegance of the FCC's proposal is it recognizes that there has to be a way for public safety to integrate with the commercial networks. They have spectrum that they can rely upon. They'll have funding that they can rely upon. The technology has got us to a place where public safety is going to be using the same technology and enjoy the same economies of scope and scale rather than being isolated in a narrow niche technology. So, the final thing I would say, or the next to final thing I would say, is this really is an opportunity for the FCC to take advantage of this. They've done an enormous amount of hard work. I think the chairman deserves a lot of credit. The analysis that went into the National Broadband Plan and the proposal that they have before them is something that they ought to be moving on. I think there's an awful lot of support for that in the Congress. It's not unanimous support, but there's never going to be. But I think this is an opportunity for us to make enormous progress on a matter of enormous national significance, and we shouldn't let it go to waste. And so I guess the very final thing I would say on this is, and I think it's building on Harold's point, is that this clearly is an issue of real significance to our competitive marketplace. Nobody's saying that this should be viewed as strictly a public safety issue or strictly as a competitive issue. We really need to find a path where we are serving both of those positive public policy outcomes in tandem. And if you've got a proposal that is sacrificing one in favor of the other, I think you're going to find that it's probably not the right proposal. Collaboration between these industries and the public safety community, leveraging the investment and the embedded infrastructure that we have in this country, and taking advantage of these new technologies is going to give us operability in the broadband space without the historic problems of interoperability that we had in the narrowband space.